IGBIS. And I want to welcome you to this afternoon's discussion on the Cataloging Code of Ethics. Thank you all for joining us. I want to take the opportunity to share two pieces of information with you. First, 23 is a very exciting year for us. We are having IGBIS elections this year. And we hope that the conversations that we've had with leaders within the profession that IGBIS has been running has inspired you, and that you will make yourself available to stand for office. We look forward to your applications. I've lost my place on my notes. Sorry about that. Also, the voters roll will close at the end of May. So please make sure that your membership is paid up, and please spread the message. And then secondly, I'd like to share with you what IGBIS has started. We have started with the South African subject headings list, and we are making it available on the IGBIS Google Drive. I'm going to share the link in just a bit, once I get my mouse to cooperate with me. And this is just the start. We've just had a discussion to decide should we add anything further into it and so on. But we can always do that later. I'm putting it in the chat now, and when you click on it, you should have editing right so that it will allow you to add content. Please don't delete anything at the stage. I hope that Susan is in the room. Susan, whose brilliant idea it was at the previous event, the conversation with Violet. Fox talking about metadata, telling powerful stories, and she shared with us insights and work with CS subject headings. So the list is available for you. Thank you, Susan. Is available for you to add. Please, please go ahead and do so. The next bit of information, or why I'm particularly mentioning that, is because the conversation that we had with Violet was what we hope would be a start of conversations around the tools that we are using in subject headings list and so on. IGBIS has in the past had the Dewey editors presenting. Dr. Esther Marie presented on INACO subject headings. I don't know that we've had anybody presenting on SACO submissions for Library of Congress subject headings, but we were particularly asked about the CS subject headings. So we've started with that. That conversation, if you will remember last year, I'm saying last year, but I'm really having to check if it was last year because it seems such a long time ago now. We had a workshop with Dr. Deborah Lee in June. And out of that came the idea to set up a South African task team, because Dr. Deborah Lee talked about the code of ethics that has been developed. So this afternoon, we will have some progress and updates presented by Tini de Klerk, whom I'm sure everybody knows very well, on the progress of the South African Cataloging Code of Ethics task team and what they've got in store for us. I'm not going to steal your thunder, Tini. You can make that presentation yourself. And then we are delighted to introduce to the South African community Jane Daniels and her colleagues, Beth Shoemaker, Karen Snow, May Chan, who isn't with us this afternoon, but we will acknowledge her as part of the cohort of colleagues who created and developed the cataloging task team. Diana Ferger, I hope that I pronounced that correctly, and Diane Pennington, who will share with us the development and the consultation of that they did around the Cataloging Code of Ethics. So we have certainly been inspired on this course of action because of the Cataloging Code of Ethics, which Sarah, our national PRO, I don't know, came across, or I don't know, Sarah, if you particularly attended it, but we thought it was an important issue. And so we are going to be spending, and we have spent a bit of time on it already. And so we are very pleased that Jane reached out to us and offered to come on board and share their story with us. So I'm not going to talk much more further because it is late in the afternoon for us, of course, early in the morning for our colleagues from outside South Africa. The only thing that I want to say is we do want to take a photo or a screenshot. So we will ask you to put your cameras on towards the end of the session. And please feel free to put questions in the chat while you're thinking about it as presentations are going. There is some space on the program for questions and so on, but please feel free to pose them in the chat as well. I think that's the end of my story. Then let me introduce Ms. Tini de Klerk, who will talk about the work of the South African task team on cataloging. Thanks, Tini.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Specifically, welcome to our colleagues from practice, and as well as our honored international guests, the task team members, and also the IGBIS committee who put forth this opportunity to share whatever there is available to share. I'm speaking about the cataloging task team on ethics, and this I'm standing in for the convener of the task team, who is Judith Ngobo. Unfortunately, she's not able to take a position here this afternoon, but yes. So the presentation's outline is broadly like that. I've mentioned the name of the task team. We will speak a little bit about the background, how the task team came into existence, who are the members of the task team, and other task team members. We have a leadership, a few people that's dealing with leadership, the other broader task team members, the purpose of the task team, the role of the task team, the methods of our working, the schedule. Most of the time today, I will be talking about that. And then we'll be at the end of this session. The presentation is a repeat of mainly what was happening during the 22 Rialto conference. I've updated it somewhat where it is necessary, so it is not quite original work here. So the task team's name is the Cataloging Code of Ethics in South Africa task team. We have a few members, mainly 3 that's dealing with the leadership, and some others that's joining us in that. The background to the task team was, as Fatima mentioned earlier, that in June 2022, IGBIS hosted a webinar presenting or introducing Dr. Lee on cataloging ethics and inclusivity. We have responded to the topic by recruiting a cataloging code of ethics task team for South Africa. And the task team formalized itself and decided to approach this task by following the steps of a typical questionnaire. So, as I mentioned, our coordinator is Judith Ngovo. She's a metadata librarian at the University of Zululand. She has experience in metadata creation. She is a UKZN master's graduate, and she has interest in cataloging information services, and I cannot see the others because the screen is shared with all the pictures. There is me. Like others, I have experience in the information industry for quite many years. Currently, I'm a librarian at the Wokani Theological College. I am knowledgeable about media center management, metadata librarianship, teaching, etc. I've served on various committees. I have a master's degree, and I'm also a professional librarian membership, as is Judith as well. And then we have Karen Oxley, our very hardworking secretary. She's at the South African Weather Service, a principal librarian. She also has professional librarianship status. She is also quite a lot of years in the industry, and the both of us know each other since 2004 when we started with our IGBIS activities. Other members of the committee are listed there. We have Nikki Potgieter from the National Library of South Africa, and you will see there's also Martha Mampoke, Sarah Goldby. Sarah is also from the Liasa IGBIS membership, an observer, actually for the past few times more than an observer. At the cataloging ethics task team, we have people from the University of Johannesburg and the Witwatersrand and University of Zululand. So, and sometimes we have extra members attending. So I'm not going to list all of them here, but just to give you an indication of the spread of our membership. The purpose of the task team is to develop a South African interpretation of the cataloging ethics code and its alignment with the global context. It is also to coordinate, lead, and manage the cataloging code of ethics process or project within South Africa. And it also serves as a support for the cataloging code of ethics projects. The role of the task team is mainly to compile a response to the code of ethics for metadata describers from South Africa, and to produce a document embodying the collective experiences and wisdom of the community of practice in the South African context. This is really a good phrase to me, embodying the collective experiences and wisdom of the community of practice in the South African context. The methods of our working, we established a schedule, we meet virtually, and there's also communications with IGBIS as the bigger body, responsible body for the task team. We delegate and determine tasks. From there, we collaborate with IGBIS to produce and submit reports on progress. And then, of course, the questionnaire, the steps of a questionnaire And yeah, if you follow that steps, this determine what your activities would be. So we are here. Here is the schedule or the work plan. We started in November 2022 with the first step, and this was to establish the purpose of this questionnaire and, of course, then of all the activities. We are going to have a pilot questionnaire and a true questionnaire. Step 2 took place during February 2023. We started to develop the questionnaires, ask the questions for the questionnaire. This was quite an interesting exercise, and we allowed us sufficient time to get to the relevant questions, see how to phrase it and formulate it, see how they should follow one after the other, and so on. We are currently at step 3. We are around the corner of May 2023, where the pilot questionnaire will be distributed to the test sites. We will receive response from there, adjust whatever is necessary, and then distribute it to the broader cataloging community. We are busy finalizing and finishing off the questionnaire. Sarah was very helpful in putting it into the correct platform for us. So next week is May 2023, and then the pilot will go out, and towards the middle of May, the questionnaire will be sent out to the broader community. And then, so we are in the middle of the process, more or less. In June, we will work on the results, and July, August, we will compile the report, and then during September, around about the conference time, we plan to hand over the final product to the IGBIS team. I just want to inform you a little bit about our purpose statement, which is the first step that we took. You will also, when the questionnaire is being distributed, you will see we have a shorter and a longer version of the purpose statement. In the questionnaire itself, we will only share a summary statement of the purpose, but you will have access to the more detailed one. And we have covered 5 aspects in the purpose statement. What is the aim of this questionnaire, and what is the objective of the questionnaire? We did a literature study to find out what was written, and we came upon the Cataloging Ethics Steering Committee's website. It is a website full of and rich of information. This is something that you can certainly go and have a look at. It is also there that we have a very complete article, and I think it was published in the Cataloging and Classification Quarterly, about the process that the Cataloging Ethics Steering Committee had, and the result, namely this Cataloging Code of Ethics that they presented. It is really interesting to see what aspects are relevant in such a question regarding the ethics of our work, which is cataloging or resource description. I've also included Dr. Lee's presentation that she had and shared with us earlier in 2022. There's also a reference to OCLC and the IFLA newsletter published December last year about steps that we can take this process further. How and what do we do with the cataloging ethics code? Then there's a short paragraph about the resources that we had to use, and then a last paragraph that's dealing with our approach that I mentioned quickly. We are going to have a pilot questionnaire and then the true questionnaire. I just want to tell you that for the pilot, we are going to distribute it to the professional catalogers. Of course, they need to check our wording and when we publish it to the broader community, would it be received favorably? And then the broader community just only not consists of professional catalogers, but everybody dealing with cataloging in some or other aspect. So if you are a library assistant, for instance, that's dealing with some or other aspect of cataloging, when you're searching for titles in the database, or if you are processing the physical materials, you are included. It is also for the managers of our cataloging sections, and also for those who are teaching cataloging to prospective students and even in continuing education environments and so on. And then just quickly about our questionnaire. I'm not going to tell you all about it. You must sign on to and do it yourself to find out exactly what we have in store for you in the questionnaire. But I can say quickly, we have 3 sections. The first one will deal with your the demographic profiles. Who are the people that's participating? We need to know who you are. The second part would deal with the statements themselves. We are testing, or we are requiring of you to tell us, how do you feel about these statements? And do you have any comments? And then we bring the statements into the workplaces, close to your workplaces, and align this to the ethics code with your daily practical activities. And lastly, we focus on ethical issues, the cataloging ethical issues. What are your experiences? And especially the standards that we are using to open up the information that's covered within the resources. So on this note, I also want to thank the IGBIS committee for just having this opportunity at this time, just before we are going to send out the questionnaire to our South African community. And we're looking forward to receive your responses. I just have a question for the International Standing Committee on Cataloging Ethics. We are now dealing with the South African interpretation of this ethics code. And I want to know, certainly it's becoming sort of a standard. So then everybody has to apply it in more or less in the same way. But what do we do with the South African interpretation? Do we use it as it is for the South African conditions? Or shall we submit it somewhere to be part of a bigger worldwide interpretation of the ethics code? So I am through, and I'm thanking you for your attention. And you can ask any questions. I hope I will be able to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tini. Okay, so there's a short space of time for any questions. Are there any questions for Tini and on the South African Cataloging Task Team?
Ingrid, can I ask a question?
Yes.
It's it's hard to know. Tini, do you anticipate or do you hope that there will be conversations within the cataloging departments about the code and how the institution might support it?
Yes, this would be really interesting. You know, this is a new thing. Well, to me it is a new thing, but certainly not to me only. I think it would be a very good thing for the institutions, the various libraries types and the cataloging sections, to take the time and look at this the statements and how it might impact the South African situation. And I think once you just look at the questions or the statements, you will be interested in going further with the process.
Thank you, Tini.
Any other questions?
May I just add something, Ingrid? Sorry, I'm being very
Sure.
chatty this afternoon. I just wanted to alert the colleagues that Sarah has posted the link. If there are colleagues who don't know or have joined the conversation later, to the cataloging code of ethics. So I hope colleagues have seen it, and if you're trying to remember or you weren't familiar with it or trying to catch up just generally, please click on the link. It will take you to the cataloging code of ethics. You'll find it in the chat. Thanks, Ingrid.
Okay, I don't see that there are any other questions. I think we can carry on and move over to our international speakers. I'm not sure who's going first.
So I'll be sharing, this is Beth Shoemaker. My video has been disabled. So hopefully you'll be able to see me in a bit. I'm going to share my slides and then we'll begin our presentation. There we go. Let me get here we go. So thank you so much for inviting us to speak today. We're so happy to share this work with you, and I'd just like to comment that I'm so excited that you have your own task group and you're looking at how this could be applied and perhaps adapted in a South African context. That's exactly what we hoped when we were working on the Code of Ethics, is that different constituencies, countries, kinds of cataloging would take the document that we created with international input and really adapt this to how it works in different places. So we're so thrilled to both be invited and so interested to hear how your process is developing. I'll just add that we certainly hope that when you have a final document that's approved by the South African community, that perhaps you'll share it with us. We have several translations and different documents on our website, and we'd love to include the South African version of what Code of Ethics works for you with a wider constituency as well. So just to start, okay. There we are. There I am. So our plan for this presentation is that I'll introduce our steering committee. We'll talk about why we need a cataloging code of ethics, although I suspect many people who are here understand that, but we'll talk about it briefly. We'll talk about the key events of how the code of ethics was developed, and how that it was a community innovator that we really wanted to broadly canvass the cataloging community. And then we'll talk about the code itself as it stands, and we'll talk about the professional endorsement that we've had for the code already, and how the continuing advocacy is sort of unspooling. So the original Code of Ethics Steering Committee was made up of representatives from Canada, the US, and the UK. I think my name might be first because I have the longest attribution. So I work, I am an American, but I do work in Canada at Victoria University, which is at the University of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. I'm a manager of a bibliographic services team. I also am a rare book cataloger by training and preference, and I do that here at Victoria University as well. Each person will mention who they are as they speak, but Karen Snow is my co-chair. We have been co-chairing the steering committee, which has been an excellent thing to do. Karen is a LIS educator and in charge of the doctoral program at Dominican University, which is in the greater Chicago area. Mei Chan is head of metadata at the University of Toronto in Canada. Unfortunately, Mei can't be with us today. She is in the middle of a search committee meeting to hire somebody in her department, and it couldn't be rescheduled, unfortunately. So Jane Daniels, who many of you may know, is retired from Cardiff Metropolitan University, and she is a cataloger and was excellent at keeping us grounded during our process. Sarah Ferger is a cataloger at Joliet Public Library. Again, that's in the greater Chicago area, sort of writ large. And Diane Pennington, who is also with us, who is a library and information educator at Edinburgh Napier University. Sorry, that's a new one for us, so I gotta get all the words together. Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland. So we tried really hard. We wanted educators, we wanted catalogers, we wanted to make sure we had somebody from public library and also academic libraries, people who are managers, LIS educators. So we really wanted to have kind of some broad representation about the kinds of jobs that people do in cataloging departments when this group came together. And I think that turns it over to Karen. Are you next?
Actually, I think Jane.
Oh,
Yes,
Jane might be next.
Yeah, it's me next. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's fantastic to be able to share the work that we've done so far and to see what you're doing in terms of building on that and coming up with something that you know will fit your requirements in South Africa. So thank you very much for the invite. As was mentioned very briefly, I am now retired from Cardiff Metropolitan University, but I was a bibliographic librarian there for 19 years. So I do come with public library experience as well. And I'm currently working in my local museum since retirement. So I'm still carrying the cataloguing flag, but in a different sector, but the code applies equally well in museums. So very quickly then, we've got the link up there to the Cataloguing Ethics website. Please do take a look at it if you haven't had a chance to visit there. A lot of the information that we'll give you today is included there, but you'll also find information about the working groups that helped us create the code, the reports that they produced, plus an extensive bibliography on cataloguing ethics itself. So please, when you get a minute, do take a look. We also keep it updated with all of our advocacy and promotional work for the code, and also have translations that have been produced of the code so far as well. Very kindly, the link to the code was posted in the chat, so thank you very much for doing that. So I can move swiftly on. So as Beth said, I don't really want to, we have a quaint saying, teach grandmother how to suck eggs. I've never really understood it myself in a British context, but it's what tends to get told when, or used when people say, yeah, well, we already all know that, so why bother telling it again? I wanted to include this slide really. It's not something that cataloguers tend to ask, but certainly our colleagues in the wider library and information stratosphere can sometimes think, well, why do you need a separate cataloguing code of ethics? And I suppose what it comes down to is that they would look at our professional organisations who obviously do produce overarching catalogue codes of ethics for the profession. But obviously we have special responsibilities in cataloguing and classification work. How we describe something, where we choose to how we choose to classify it. All of this has an impact on search and discovery, and it can promote resources and it can demote resources. So that's why we would tend to say, in a nutshell, that's why our work is so important. However, what can happen is it can get, because we do it and generally don't say very much about it, we can get a little bit overlooked. The task itself can be sort of seen as, oh, it's just data entry. Of course, we know that isn't the case. So the other factor with the code of ethics is that it does provide agency and empowerment to you in terms of being able to advocate not only the work you do, but also the need for wider collaborations and partnerships in aid of making sure that your community's requirements are catered for. The code itself also very timely in terms of its inspiration by the critical cataloguing movement, which obviously was all about focusing in and understanding and changing how the largely Western knowledge organisations and standards that we use have been used as a means of codifying systems of oppression, really. Something that we all want to change. And I think globally, we're all up to the task, and we just need to formulate more partnerships and collaborations to be able to do this on a global scale. And all of this is especially relevant in the context of decolonization and the drive for diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only in our metadata that we produce, but also actually within our workforces and our organizations. So I hope that sort of gives you in a nutshell why the kind of answers that we gave when we were asked, well, why do you need a cataloguing code of ethics? So if we move on to the next slide, this is a fantastic diagram that Karen created for us, actually. So as it says, it's the cataloguing ecosystem, challenges and opportunities. I feel very strongly that what we see here is the actual breadth and depth of cataloguing and classification work. We have to traverse all of these boundaries. We have to take into account what happens within our institutions, how we can parlay and work with our user communities, the wider community of practice, so looking at our standards, and also, very importantly, the external influences. This usually involves, catalogues don't tend to work alone. We tend to be part of these wider circles of influence and spheres of activity. So it's very important for us to be able to review regularly what are our partnerships, what are our collaborations, can we extend them, can we even create them? And this is particularly important when you're managing a section and you've got limited resources and you need to really think about, okay, I know I've got to do X, Y, and Z. What's the best way for me to do this? Because you obviously don't want to be duplicating the effort of maybe another university that might happen to be just down the road from you, or even thousands of miles away, but with a broadly similar user group. So I don't want to go too much into this diagram. It's in the presentation, but I think it can be quite useful for you at whatever level you are in the hierarchy in your organization, I think if you take this and just draw some arrows on it, think about all the connections that there are and your spheres of activity and the opportunities that you might have to forge new partnerships. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Karen now.
Thank you, Jane. I also want to echo my colleagues' comments about how fantastic the work, pardon me, you're doing so far to interpret the Code of Ethics, and it's just fantastic. So my part is to really just give some background to how this came to be. This group and just this effort in general is many years old. This is not something that just kind of came out of the blue a few years ago. There has been quite a bit of discussion over the years about cataloging ethics, but there hasn't been a major effort, I guess, to put together a cataloging code of ethics, even though there has been recognition that a separate code of ethics would be helpful in this realm. And so I'm going to say, I mean, I know Beth probably didn't want me to say this, but she did. Beth wrote an article that came out in 2015. Here, I'm going to post the citation in the chat just so you're aware. But she wrote this article essentially kind of, making a call, right, to the cataloging community saying, hey, I think it's time. I think it's time for us to really seriously consider doing this work. And so she was invited to the American Library Association annual conference in the summer of 2017 to present with the wonderful Hope Olson, who wrote the seminal work on this topic called A Power to Name. And so the name of this form, A Power That Is Moral, Cataloging and Ethics. This was kind of, at least from my recollection, kind of the first major discussion we had with at least the cataloging community that was at the ALA annual conference this year about how do we do this, right? I think we all recognize that this is needed, but how are we going to do this, right? And we got some great feedback from people in terms of, okay, this needs to be really transparent, it needs to be community driven. It can't just be just a group of people kind of secretly getting together in the back room and getting this done in a few months, right? This really needs to be a true community effort. And so we continued this conversation at the American Library Association midwinter meeting, which was early in 2018. This cooperatively conscientious cataloging, that's hard to say fast 3 times. But as it says here, provided a venue for attendees to share their ideas and concerns about the process that was then kind of now underway, right? I developed them through ALA, at least initially, to develop a code of ethics for the cataloging community. And so we did, at that point around this time, also reach out. Well, actually, it was Jane Daniels. I'll just kind of say right now, it was Jane Daniels who kind of reached out to us, who kind of heard what we were doing and said, hey, we want to be involved, right? Those of us in the UK. And then we also reached out to our Canadian colleagues as well. So next slide, Beth. And so just a little break here in the timeline here. As we were doing this work and collecting this information from the community, eventually we did come up with these principles and values in cataloging work that helped us develop the statements of ethical principles ultimately in the cataloging code of ethics. But these bullets, right, these principles and values kept coming up over and over again in our conversations, in the research literature. And so we ultimately named these very specifically in our document to show how these are kind of driving what we ended up producing. So, access to resources and metadata, acknowledging bias, advocacy, collaboration, critically applying standards, diversity, equity, inclusion, education and training, which for some thought that was kind of an interesting inclusion in a cataloging ethics document, but we felt very strongly about including that. Respect for agent privacy and preferences, responsibility and transparency, and then understanding and meeting user needs. So I do encourage you all as a group to perhaps, look at these right more closely to see, okay, yes, these are the principles and values that you find in your work in South Africa as well. I'm willing to bet that going to be either exactly the same or very similar to perhaps what you're going to discuss as well in your work. So next slide. All right, and so let's see, and then I have a few more right here. So continuing on in the timeline, our first cataloging ethics steering committee meeting was in February of 2019. We met online by Zoom, and we knew immediately, right? This is something that we agreed upon pretty much immediately when we met, is that we were not going to do this by ourselves. Just the 6 of us. There's just 6 of us, right? We didn't want to come up with a document all on our own because we don't have the broad knowledge that we needed from the cataloging community to do this. And so we put out a call for volunteers to as many channels as we could come up with to volunteer on these working groups that we decided. So 6 working groups based upon 6 kind of major categories, I guess you can say, groupings of cataloging ethics issues, like with classification, authority work, working conditions, etc. Right? And we got a great response. Ultimately, 72 people contributed to the final reports that are posted on our website, that Cataloging Ethics Steering Committee website. If you want to look at those, they're fantastic. But they really helped guide us, right? They helped kind of give us the lay of the land on cataloging ethics and in so many different areas that helped us craft the document that you see today. But we went through several drafts of that, but which are also posted on our website, the various drafts of the Code of Ethics. But we had, predominantly members in the working group from the US, from the UK, from Canada, but we had some also from other areas of the world as well, which was great. And since it was all virtual, that really helped kind of gain us some additional volunteers there. So, all right, so next slide. All right, and so here, by the way, this is the ones the groups I was talking about, the 6 areas for the working groups: authority work, classification, subject headings / control vocabularies, access, scope, and infrastructure, staffing and working conditions, as well as resource discovery and accessibility. And once again, you can kind of see more about those groups and kind of their scope on our website if you're interested in kind of digging into that more. But we gave them essentially, if I remember correctly, like half a year to produce a report for us. They would gather, they had a chair of their working group, and we were liaisons to each group. Each of us had a group that we liaised with, and they once again produced these great reports that you see on the website that really helped us, informed our work. Okay, so next slide is I'm still going. Yes, there we go. And so finally, and then I'll turn this over to Sarah Ferger. We took that information right from the working groups and produced a draft in early 2020. And things took a little bit longer, as you can imagine, because we all know what was going on in early 2020. So it took a little bit longer than we anticipated, but we still were able to put out a first draft for the summer that we put in a Google document and encouraged, once again, through various channels, people to comment on the document. Just, whoever wanted to comment, we set it so that anyone can comment on it, even anonymously if they wanted. We gathered that information. We produced a second draft. Once again, put that out in a Google document and asked for feedback. And that was kind of later on in 2020 for that second public consultation period. And then finally, using the additional feedback we received from that second draft, we produced the version that you see now on our website. It was released in January of 2021. So, all right. So I'll turn this over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you to all of you for inviting us here. Beth, if you would please go to our slide. Yes, so we've heard a little bit now about the need for the code, about what led up to the code, and it falls to me to talk a little bit about the code itself. So we really wanted to keep this short and practical, complementing and kind of matching with the style of other types of professional codes of ethics, right? So there's 2 parts. The first one is kind of our introduction and scope. We really wanted to kind of outline our approach, talk about our important principles, and then the second part is the actual statements of ethical principles. So again, we really want to create systemic change. We need support, right? We're acknowledging in this introduction that every workplace is different. Responses to ethical situations are framed by those local contexts, which is why it is so exciting and wonderful to see that South Africa is also taking that and making it work for all of you. So again, the code isn't a contract. It's a framework for approaching cataloging work. It's meant to be a tool for practitioners, employers, people who are cataloging adjacent, vendors, students, educators, to kind of fall back on when ethical considerations or issues arise. Beth, if you wouldn't mind. So again, part 2 is our statements of ethical principles. This is like a really like a high level conceptual approach. It's not a checklist, it's not a contract, it's a lens for examining existing policy and practice. And generally they can be grouped under 3 thematic headings: audiences, tasks, hurdles, collaboration, and then education, jobs, and advocacy. So different aspects of this work, not necessarily just subject headings. It happened a lot in our initial discussions that people would think, oh, well, just make subject headings better and that'll solve the problem. But we all know in practice that is not the case. Next slide, please. So if we're thinking about audiences, tasks, barriers, hurdles, statements 1, 2, 3, and 10. So statement number 1, we catalog resources in our collection with the end user in mind to facilitate access and promote discovery. This seems pretty self-explanatory, right? But we really need to, especially when we're talking with perhaps management, leadership, people who are affected by cataloging work, but not in the dregs of it, if you will, to kind of explain our approach. We commit to describing resources without discrimination while respecting privacy and preferences of agents. And that gets back to what Karen mentioned. One of our kind of guiding principles was respecting the privacy of our agents, right? While still making information accessible. And we acknowledge that we bring our own biases to the workplace, and we strive to overcome personal, institutional, and societal prejudices in our work. With this statement, I like to think of that diagram that Jane talked about and that Karen created, right? So we don't only have our own personal biases shaped by our lived experiences, we're also thinking about institutional, societal, cultural prejudices, right? And then statement number 10, we want to work with our user communities to provide relevant and timely services. It's really easy to get bogged down in making sure everything is correct. We got to have that balance of efficiency and accuracy. Next slide, please. And then collaborations. We want to collaborate widely, right? We don't, as Karen said, we didn't want this just to be the 6 of us, and going forward, we don't want it to be the 6 of us. We want to ask other communities of practice to assist, both in the creation, distribution, maintenance, and enrichment. Number 4, we recognize that all standards are biased. Even with the best of intentions, there is going to be bias, and we're going to approach all those standards critically and do what we can to make cataloging more inclusive. And number 5, we support efforts to make standards and tools financially, intellectually, and technologically accessible. It should be of no surprise that a lot of these standards that we are expected to both teach and to maintain are not accessible. I work in a public library, and I am very fortunate to have access to RDA Toolkit, but a lot of my public library colleagues just don't have that resource. So how can we ask people to maintain this high level of cataloging if these resources and tools aren't available to them? So I will pass it over to Diane to talk about other aspects of these statements.
Great. So hello, everyone. I'm the last one to speak. You'll be happy to know. I'm Diane Rasmussen-Pennington. I am a professor and the director of research in the iSchool at Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland. And if you could go to the next slide, please, Beth. I should also say as well that I am the chair of the metadata and discovery group in CILIP, and Jane Daniels, who is too modest to admit that she is our amazing past chair, no longer active in the group, but more than happy to have been a part of this project, because Jane was the one who brought me into this project and then therefore the committee. She's really good at that sort of thing. So to talk a little bit more about different areas of the code that applies to different areas, not just within a cataloging department or people who do cataloging, but that we kind of all have a role to play within a library or within an organization that has a library or some sort of information profession within it. And this has to do a lot with inclusion, diversity, equity in the workplace, and that we need to work to sort of promote the place of catalogers and metadata professionals within organizations. For those of you who do this kind of work, it is difficult sometimes to get people outside of it to understand the range and the scope of all of the work that we do and the different types of expertise and different types of metadata and sort of all the technical systems that go behind it, as well as all of the standards that we have to consistently keep up to date. And on top of that, making sure that it's good quality and of course ethical. So there's quite a bit involved in all that. And sometimes I think we kind of tend to work in the back room or in the basement kind of people. And so we don't necessarily get noticed like we should for all of the different things that we do. And so that was something that Beth particularly led that group on. Taking responsibility for cataloging decisions and advocating for transparency. That means that whatever decisions that we make as catalogers or cataloging educators or people who manage these kinds of systems, that we will overlook what we do. And we're not going to be perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have lessons to learn, but we will continue to communicate what we do and don't do well or do really well as it may pertain to what we're doing. And ultimately advocating for the value of cataloging work within our organizations and with external partners. Some of the work that some of us have done in the past couple of years since the current version of the code was released has been speaking to different groups, including vendors, for example. I spoke at a publishers conference in the UK called UKSG last year with some other colleagues that are on the Metadata and Discovery Group Committee, talking about the importance of ebook metadata being both quality and ethical, and for book vendors and book metadata vendors whose records we purchase and put into our systems to help them understand that it is important, and that it help them understand that when they create metadata and we put into our systems, we do expect that it will be of professional quality, as we would all do ourselves individually. Next slide, please, Beth. And another thing that we've been doing as well is talking about library leadership. So library managers who may not necessarily know what we do day to day as metadata and cataloging professionals, and to help them understand that the catalog and any sort of metadata that we do is really at the center of the library. Without metadata, people can't find the thing. You know, we can talk about all kinds of different aspects to it, but if we don't have that information, whether it's a journal article or a web resource or a traditional monograph or something else, we need to have people understand that without what we do, the rest of it doesn't really even have the impact that it should have if they can't find whatever the thing is that they want to find. And so that has a lot of implications for what we do with strategy at a management level. How does this pertain to library strategic planning? How do we need to explain to the people that fund our libraries, so university administrations or city councils or whatever types of governance you have that control the budgets and the staffing and everything in the library, what exactly does that mean? And what I always say to people, if they're completely outside of it, is like, do you use Google? And they're like, oh yeah, I use Google. And like, well, you're using metadata. Without metadata, Google wouldn't work because there'd be nothing to search and nothing to find. So trying to put things into more practical context for people who don't do work within the library profession, and specifically cataloging and metadata work, I think is really important for us to be able to communicate, which is not always the most comfortable or the easiest thing to do, but I think it's really necessary to kind of demonstrate that value to management to help them understand, again, why are we doing what we are doing and why is it important, and what obviously why we're so essential to the strategic vision of the entire organization. Next slide, please. So we've had the 3 countries that we collectively represent on this committee. We've had some success with first the American Library Association endorsing the code formally in November of 2021. As you saw, the code was released in early 2021, so it was not an immediate process, which is fine because everyone wanted to make sure that they knew what they were endorsing. And in March 2022, it followed with the SILUP trustees here in the UK. And May is not here to talk about the Canadian context, unfortunately, but there has been an ongoing consultation within Canada. It's a complex situation in Canada with having 2 official languages and different communities that have stakes in this sort of situation. But they're doing sort of a grassroots consultation at the moment, and that will be finished by the end of this year. Next slide, please. So you can see a lot of the activity that has been going on. It certainly has not been a matter of we release the code and stop doing work. It's been for me quite nonstop in terms of doing journal articles and presentations and webinars and speaking to different people about different ways that they can use it, what it means for librarians who don't do cataloging work every day. But all of those, there's a lot of links on our website that you can see all the different activities that we've all been doing within our local settings. We've had it so far translated into Greek, Arabic, and Welsh. We are talking to a group of librarians in Greece, I believe it's next week. Thanks to Jane Daniels for helping us get that translated into Welsh by the National Library of Wales, and we have an Arabic translation. And so if there are other languages that are welcome, for example, Afrikaans in South Africa, or whatever languages you feel would be helpful in your context as well, we certainly would welcome the translations, and we'll link to them obviously on our website and give you proper credit for that if you're willing to do it. We're waiting for the Canadian consultation to finish, and we're hoping after that point, we will be able to go to IFLA to talk about this at the international level and see if there is a way to get this to be an international cataloging code of ethics. But of course, it's truly my belief as I've continued to think about this throughout the writing of the code and now that it's been released, that a lot of what we do in cataloging and metadata work is contextual and influenced by society. And so even though we are more and more cooperative around the world with different countries in IFLA, that locally we have different languages, different cultures, different contexts that need to be considered. And so that's really why, as everyone else has said, it's really great that you guys are doing this work for yourselves here in South Africa and seeing what you can do to make it apply to you the best way possible. So I think that is the end of our slides, right? So yeah, I guess at this point, we're happy to have discussion, answer questions, anything else that you would like to cover with us today. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Are there any questions from the floor? This is now your time, an opportunity to ask our international speakers for any clarity. Any questions, please raise your hand or put it into the chat. No questions? Everyone's happy with what you said. So there's a comment from Susan Patterson. Have you considered calling it Catalogers Code of Ethics?
I think we did. I think when we initially started this effort, in fact, that's, I think, the name of our website actually is a code of ethics for catalogers. And I think that through our discussions, we felt like this work really is a bit even broader than just catalogers. As like a library and information science educator, I am no longer a practicing cataloger. And yet this code of ethics is really helpful for me, as a frame to teach my students cataloging ethics. So I think it is, we kind of discussed this, we felt it's more for cataloging and not just specifically catalogers, but catalogers can certainly use it, right? But it's kind of broader than that. But I don't know if my steering committee colleagues want any further, say anything further about that.
Yeah, and I guess to add to that as well, because I've been, like I said, speaking to vendors and speaking to, I did a webinar a couple weeks ago in Scotland for academic university librarians in general who may or may not be catalogers, that we feel like that this applies to all of us because, as Karen's diagram illustrates, for example, that catalogers and cataloging don't live in their own little compartment, that there are lots of factors that go into the decisions and the way that things are created. And so we really do want to get as much visibility of this work as possible to the vendors and to everyone else who's involved in this sort of ecosystem of, and to make so it's not just about catalogers, but anyone who is concerned in some way or another has a stake in cataloging and descriptive practices and all of these things.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, because now I'm working in the museum sector, what we purposefully wanted to do was make the code available to anyone who does any kind of cataloguing work, regardless of sector. So they could be in the commercial sector of working for a record vendor. They could be working for a systems provider, like, you know, IGBIS, ProQuest, EBSCO, whatever it happens to be, OCLC. In the museum sector, for instance, they very rarely will have someone who's got the job title cataloguer. It's actually the curators that will do the description work for the collections. So that's quite a good reason to sort of separate it out a little bit, because we're very keen that whatever we produce could be used for anyone doing any kind of cataloguing work, no matter what their actual job title was. But they could use the code as a tool in their sphere of activity.
Yeah, I think that's important consideration, that it's not just libraries, that it goes across the range of information organizations that work with information and metadata. So I think that is very important. Yeah. Okay, any more questions or comments? Anything
Ingrid,
that you'd like to say?
It's Fatima, yeah. I just wanted to, I want to comment on the slide of Diane's on why cataloging ethics matter for library leadership. Because that is really, that's, you know, they're talking about who the code is for, and calling it catalogers limits it because it's for libraries and anybody doing any kind of description work. But the slide in particular, Diane, I like the bullet about risk management and responsibility. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that one? Because I think sometimes we miss, you know, we're sitting in our cataloging departments and we have this resource in front of us and we sort of miss the wider societal impact of it. And that in fact, we do put our institutions at risk with the words that we use and the way that we describe. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I can talk a little bit about the societal impact, and then I'll pass it to Beth because she's actually in management herself in a library. But I guess that's something that I've been looking at a lot recently, just in terms of how people are positioned, how identities are positioned, and the words that we use for those identities. Different people have different ways of, you know, explaining that. And, you know, just as a personal example, and I can come up with many, but so I am an American citizen living and working in Scotland. When I fill out my SILIP demographics form, and I have to choose my race, the choice that applies to me is other. If I were an American, if I were in America, I wouldn't be an other, but I'm an other in the UK, but people don't necessarily see me as another in the UK because of my visual appearance, right? And so there are a lot of things that people assume in different places for different reasons. My fiance, I'm getting married in June, has cerebral palsy. He was grown up being called a spastic, which I think is a terrible term. Other people will continue to say, well, we should call him a person with a disability or a disabled person, depending on how they choose to position their language. To him, words don't matter. What matters is that he lives with a disability. He doesn't have use of the right side of his body. So to him, words aren't as important as the actual lived experience of what it's like to be disabled. So I think it's societal as well as individual. And that's a really hard thing to deal with, because I don't know how we represent individual and collective differences and similarities within something that's supposed to be standards, subject headings. It was great to see those South African subject heading suggestions that you put up. But I think there's a lot more work to do in terms of some of the work that OCLC has done, for example, is making sure that user groups that are affected by our systems and our languages and so on that we use in these systems, that the users are represented and consulted, which is probably not something that we've done enough of in the past within library and information science. But those are just the huge societal impact. Beth, if you want to say something about workplaces and management, that'd be great too.
Thank you. There was a question from Clarice.
Ingrid, sorry, Ingrid, Beth, I would like to add something. Can I hear
sorry.
what Beth would like to say?
Diane really summed it up really well, but also as a library manager, I have to think about how the people that I manage work, what they need to work effectively, and how each of them has a different style of approach to the work that they do. And it's so it's not only how we look outward with our work, which is really important, but also how we look inward and what we need to do the work most efficiently, but also that we're thinking about the things that we sort of the things that Diane mentioned, right? So what language are we using to talk about different people? What language are we using to talk about ourselves and to talk about the work that we do? And so I am always looking inward to see how the people that I manage, what they need, how they work best. Are they getting the support they need? Are they getting to the conferences or the trainings that they need? Are they getting to do work that they enjoy? Is there something else that they can also do that makes them feel better about the work that they do? And also looking outward, because as a manager, of course, I report up to my chief librarian, and what can I do to bring our work more clearly to her so she can advocate across the wider university? And so I sit in that middle point, and many of us do. I'm sure there are plenty of people here who manage departments. And so thinking about how I can help have my staff do their best job, and how I can translate that up to my chief librarian so that she understands not only the value of our work, but the work that we actually do. And I'm lucky I have a chief librarian who does understand those things, but the code is a really great vehicle for managers as well, standing in the middle between staff who's doing work and administrators, higher up administrators who need to understand our value.
Okay. Tini, I see your hand is up. You'd like to ask a question?
Yeah, I have a question for Karen. Karen Snow, but I don't know where she is now.
She's just said that she unfortunately had to leave the webinar.
Oh, that is now a pity. Because
Yeah.
the question that I wanted to ask her is, she has a very unique way of displaying her name. I don't know if you've noticed it. It says Karen Snow, and then it is qualified with she and her. And I just wanted to know from her if she wants to share with us this way of displaying your name, because I don't see anybody else's name displaying that like that. I don't know if any of the team members can say something about that. Thank you.
So I'll just comment. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Beth. It's okay.
I was just going to comment that that's fairly common in the US. In fact, mine usually says that. I'm not sure why it doesn't today. That people use their pronouns so that if they prefer they, them, or another alternative so that they can be named properly in Zoom meetings. I think if you go to their, what's it called, participants, and next to your name, you have 3 little dots, and you can rename yourself, and you can add those at that point. Or if you have a Zoom login, maybe through your institution, you can go to settings and it will just display that and change your name, and it will display that all the time. But it's quite common, I think, in North America, and I will say comes in really handy because you can't assume from someone's appearance, of course, what they prefer to be called. So so that's one way to do it. The 3 dots are the way to do it in an individual meeting, but if you have a login to Zoom, you can just set it up so that it will do that all the time.
Thank you.
Okay. Sarah, you're not going to say anything?
Beth covered it very well. I have nothing to
Okay.
add.
I see you've put yours up now too. Thank you very much. Okay, any more questions around? I don't see any more questions. Please feel free to ask, put up your hand or put it in the chat.
There's a hand,
What-
Ingrid.
Police?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you very much to IGBIS Group and Liasa for organizing this wonderful presentation. And then thank you very much to Code of Ethics for this informative presentation. It's one of those presentations that shape us positively as young catalogers in the field. So my question, I'm not good at recalling the name of the presenters who presented. So there was a slide that talks about the ecosystem challenges and opportunities. So my question there was the external influences which reflect to culture, commercial entities, and laws. Maybe if the presenter can elaborate further on that matter. Thank you very much.
Yes, if I can just elaborate then, as you've asked, thank you for the question. I think, as I said in the presentation, if people want to just take a look at that diagram and think about it in relation to their particular circumstances, does actually help you to think about your existing policies, your practices, your relationships, your partnerships. In relation to the external partnerships, I think certainly in the UK, I can only speak for the UK because obviously that's where I'm based and it's where I've had the majority of my experience. Our external partners, so thinking about the university where I used to live, the partners were the people that provided the library management system that we used, the publishers and the content aggregators who sold us or licensed resources for us to use, and the intermediary sort of third-party businesses that actually licensed the metadata for us to use to put into our catalogues to enable search and discovery. So in my context, that's what the external partners were. And it's probably pretty similar, I would imagine, elsewhere in the world. You'll have companies that you do business with to provide you with your search and discovery platforms or provide metadata for you under license maybe. So that's really what we were talking about there. It's the top layer then, because certainly in higher education, we tend to rely very heavily on our commercial partners to provide the service. And what that means is that you you have the responsibility, because again, in your institution, there'll be a lot of money spent on those services. So it's about cataloguers having the agency and feeling empowered to be part of the discussions with those external agencies. So when a contract comes up for renewal, you go through a process of looking at best value for money. Are the providers keeping up with the metadata standards? Are they thinking ahead to what you might want in the metadata or what you need? Particularly important, for instance, in terms of subject headings, in terms of decolonization, but also for DEI in metadata. So it's thinking about your relationships, your partnerships, and where there are opportunities to renegotiate and review. It's very important, as with anything in life, that we just keep up to date and we keep thinking about what the future requirements are. Does that answer your question? Bit waffly.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more hands. Are there any more last opportunity for questions? No, no takers.
Ingrid, in the absence of, or maybe people are still thinking, I want to just ask Tini and the rest of the South African task team. The colleagues mentioned translation into other languages. We have 11 official languages in South Africa. Tini, I wonder if we take that on board as well, you know, with help from everybody in the room who has, who can assist with the translation. Because I'm thinking, Tini, that if you do the survey and you present the survey with the statements in the different languages, it would certainly help to make them more understandable. I'm thinking more accessible, perhaps is the right word, for people whose first languages are not English or Afrikaans. What do you think?
Fatima, thank you for the suggestion.
We'll help you, Tini, don't worry. Do you think it's a good idea? Because we could solicit help now in the room.
Yeah, no, we are, this is, if we want to have the translations, we'll have to do it very quickly, because we are going to distribute the questionnaire by the end of May. So, or in the middle of the May, in the middle of May. So, but certainly this is something to think about, and I will take it to the task team quickly. I don't know if somebody, I don't know if somebody wants to. Perhaps if there's people that that are prepared to help us with translation. Not to say that it will exactly happen, but certainly they can, perhaps they can forward their names. So that
let's hear Ingrid. Sorry, Ingrid. Tini, Ingrid, I'm butting in. Tini, let's hear from the colleagues. Colleagues, anybody have? You don't have to have like perfect, you know, skills. You just need to be able to express it. I think to start off with, we don't have to have it perfectly. I think, you know, catalogers always want things perfectly the first time around. We don't have to do it that way. We can start and it can get better as we go along. Anybody interested? Okay, let's start with Afrikaans. Martha, would you be interested?
I would consider that, Fatima,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you, Martha. Anybody else would like to assist Martha? Martha, I think you've got enough of a network to pull people in if you need. Shall I leave it at that? Dimakatsu Mandungani, what is your mother tongue? She's laughing in the background. I can hear. Mother tongue?
It's Pedi.
Sipedi.
Mhm.
Okay.
But I
Can I
can
put your name?
always check because I speak pretty very well Tsonga and Venda. But then
Tsonga. Yeah.
I'll have to get people to help. I
Okay.
can check at the department if there are other people that can quickly
Okay.
help with the translations.
Okay. What languages are we? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So how many is left until we get to 11 colleagues? And a little help. Okay, Zulu is a big one. I'm sure we've got Zulu speakers in the room. Lovely opportunity to get involved, colleagues. It will look nice in your CV. Zulu speakers, come on, colleagues. The next I'm going to go to the Xhosa speakers and they're going to beat you to it. So come on, Zulu speakers. I'm looking for names that I know, but now I'm coming up with Dlamini. Is Dlamini a Zulu name? Lungile.
Yes, I'm here, Mxolisi. I'm Zulu.
Can I put your name down?
Yes, yes, you can.
And
Olisi.
Lungile, I'm also in
Are you in?
Yes.
Which languages?
isiZulu.
isiZulu. Okay.
Yes.
So we've got 2 there. Dlamini.
There's Lily Mashaba in the chat says she can help with Sepedi.
Okay, Dimakatsu, did you hear that? Lily, who? What's the
Mashaba.
surname? Mashaba.
It's Lily Machaba.
Machaba. Thank you,
Machaba,
Lily.
yes.
Machaba. Machaba. Okay, got
Yes.
it. Dimakatsu, did you hear that?
Yes,
For the
possibility.
Sipedi, yeah. Okay. Okay, and we need Xhosa speakers. Do we have people in the room? There
I
will
see
be a
there's a
treat.
hand up from Alta.
Alta?
Yes, can I just, it's just a comment that I want to give to you guys. I wonder if this is really necessary. We can all understand English.
It is
And,
absolutely necessary, Alta, for social inclusion.
doesn't everybody understand English?
We understand it, but it's not our mother tongues.
It's going to take a lot of time.
We're not asking everybody to do all 11 languages. That's why we're canvassing the room to see who can do what. There are 10 statements. It won't take that long.
Okay.
Thank you, Alta. I thought that I heard somebody say there's a Xhosa speaker in the room. Don't be shy, colleagues. There's another offer for help with Zulu in the chat. We have got 1, 2, 3, 4,
There's
5 languages so far.
Shirley said she'll help with isiXhosa.
Excellent, thank you, Shelley. What remains still, colleagues? What languages do we still need? Tswana and Sotho. North and South. Colleagues, we're coming to the end of the session. I'm going to ask colleagues if you would like to, we'll start with the languages and the offers that we have. We're not going to keep you we're not going to keep you from the rest of your day by trying to do all 11. So we'll start with what we have. I'm going to put my email address in the chat. If you would like to contribute to translating into the 11 languages, I'm going to ask you to give me an email, send me an email. And if we miss your offer somewhere in the chat, or we can't find your contact details, please reach out as well. As you've heard from Tini, the timelines are very short. So we're going to start with whatever we have, and don't wait for us to contact you. Contact us if you don't hear from us very shortly. Ingrid, I think I'm going to hand over to you so you can hand over to Sarah.
Okay, thank you. Tini, you have a question?
Yes, I just want to ask for clarity. We have now put up a questionnaire, and the 10 statements are part of the questionnaire. Do you want us to have only the statements in the indigenous languages, or are we going to translate that whole questionnaire into all the 11 languages?
I thought we should start with the statements.
So
Tini.
we should focus on the statements.
Yeah.
I think it's if it is not on the questionnaire itself, maybe it could be elsewhere available where it could be accessible, because we already have a problem in the questionnaire with having the statement put there together with the comment going with the statement. So if we are going to translate that into all the 11 languages, or how many we have gathered
Yes,
here.
So we don't have to include all the text. We can just put the link to where the languages are. Okay.
Okay. Right.
That's what I'm
So
thinking.
we will discuss it then at the task team in further detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tini.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a very productive afternoon. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Sarah, and Sarah can close off the session for us. Thanks.
Thanks, Ingrid, and thank you, everyone. I'll keep my thanks and closing comments short because we have run over time. So all I can say is a heartfelt thank you to everyone participating this afternoon. It's hearing everyone talk about the code and the work and the journey that you've taken to get here. There's a lot more nuance that comes through hearing people communicate about it, instead of just reading some articles and reading the statements themselves. It creates a little bit of extra depth, and it's been really, I've really enjoyed it, and there's a lot of food for thought there. So thank you very much to the steering committee and to the South African task team for sharing your work this afternoon. So here at IGBIS, for the purposes of posterity, we like to take a screenshot of participants who are remaining at the end of the session, if they're comfortable to put their cameras on. Obviously, if you're not comfortable with it, no worries. But we're just going to grab a quick screenshot of everyone, and I see some smiles. It's good to see everyone. Okay, and I see everyone here. So I've never been very good at this, but I'm going to fumble around with some keyboard shortcuts and take a screenshot quickly. So, okay. And smile, everybody. Oh, no. Oh, wait. Someone started sharing their screen. No. There we go. Thank you. Okay, smile, everyone. And